Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Christopher Robin. In terms of the Disney kind of live action remake kind of franchise genre, whatever it is, there's kind of the ones that are direct adaptations with like very minor differences, and then there are the ones that actually try to do something different with it, either be a sequel or a different perspective or something like that. And Christopher Robin falls into that camp, which can, like Maleficent, I guess, which I think theoretically at least can be an interesting idea that you at least try to do something different. You're not just going like, hey, remember that movie you liked? Well, it's the same, but in live action. Is relatively boring. I get that you theoretically came up with that idea. This is not just you doing the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh or any of the other 5 animated Winnie the Pooh movies that were released in theaters. This is actually the 6th time Disney has theatrically released a Winnie the Pooh movie, believe it or not. And yes, I'm serious. But Christopher Robin seems to have the same problem that Maleficent had, where Maleficent, it's a cool idea, like, oh, we're gonna have Sleeping Beauty from the perspective of Maleficent, a fairy tale from the perspective of the villain. That could be really interesting. But instead of like telling a story in a different way, you basically just get the same like kind of 3-act big, fantasy type of story in the same structure. And although there are certain things that are interesting about it, it ends up feeling relatively boring and the same as any other film like that. Christopher Robin is, not exactly like that, but has the same problem where what you have with Christopher Robin is you have the same kind of story of a dad who's overworked who doesn't, know his kid. Basically, it's Hook, okay? It's Hook, but with Winnie the Pooh and with Christopher Robin, and he works too much and all that stuff, and doesn't see his daughter that much, who is in fact working too much at school to kind of get his approval, which he'll never give because he has no soul at this point. And so Pooh has come out of the 100-acre woods or whatever after all his friends are gone because it's all foggy, because I guess he's forgotten them or needs them at this point or something, and goes and finds him and kind of gets him to come back and remember his boyish imagination and so forth. The fact that they used a plot line that is so overdone and so cliched and such a boring kind of kids movies plot made this film have the same problem as Maleficent, where it's like, oh cool, you're doing something different, but what you're doing that's different is still the same as a bunch of other movies. In a way, it's like, yeah, it's different, but you found another way to make it samey and like feel like a whole different boring genre of things. So like you ended up sort of not really going anywhere, frankly, in terms of creativity. You managed to go from interesting to bland and turn way back around and go back to bland. And that's sort of Christopher Robin. There's certain things about this film that I think are interesting. Technical wise, it's definitely like a post Where the Wild Things Are movie. I think it's very influenced by that film, particularly how all the stuffed animals are drab and look like they're older and you can see the fur on them and stuff like that. I think that works very well. I like that it's oddly shot like Terrence Malick-y for some reason. The saturation in the past thing sort of bugs me, but I guess it's London and all foggy in that time, so I guess you can sort of let that go. Or one of my biggest problems with this movie, I think, is that you have this plot line of Christopher Robin, and he has to work on the weekend instead of going on a weekend vacation with his wife and daughter to this cottage that they also own. And at first, you're used to that plot line, but the reason he's working over the weekend is to make sure his company, who is running out of money, finds a way to save money, and he's finding a way to save money other than to actually fire people. So sure, his company's put him in a shitty situation. Sure, his boss, who's supposed to help him out, isn't actually helping him out, okay? He is in a bad situation, granted. But of all the weekends that he has worked over the weekend, this is the time. Maybe let him work, maybe like Pooh can show up next weekend, or after he solves a major financial crisis that will probably get like all of his friends at work fired, basically. That's actually kind of commendable. It's like, I sacrificed all this to save countless people who, by the way, probably can't go on vacation with their kids, probably don't have a cottage somewhere. Like, we don't really get to know any of the people in his office, and my wife and I saw this, and she was saying that like maybe the people in the office were supposed to kind of be like the characters in Winnie the Pooh, but they don't really develop them enough, so you're not even sure like what their deal is. Like, there's this black guy who smiles. I don't know what his deal is, but he likes smiling. This movie gives me no hints at them. I think it would have been cool to have like kind of a Wizard of Oz thing where like you'd have the people who did the voices, which would have been hard because they had Chris O'Dowd and then they fired him from being Tigger and brought Jim Cummings in. Trivia there for you. But it would have been a neat little thing, and it'd be cool to see Jim Cummings do something that's not just a voice role for once. That'd be neat. They don't do that. They kind of just have these people as background things, and they have a lot of like kind of supporting character problems where there's people they like you get little glimpses at, and you're not sure like what is the plot device with this person, like why even have them and give them looks like they're part of a larger film that you just didn't use or something. But it's like if he's gonna work that weekend, that's important, that's commendable. That's not just him being a workaholic, like missing everything sort of thing. You know, I think with Robin Williams, it's like just another kind of corporate buyout, you know, big corporate I forget what it exactly was, but like it wasn't like as important as like, hey, people are gonna lose their jobs, but you know, maybe forget about that because, you know, your wife and kid who are very much in a privileged position totally miss you, and you should hang out with them and just like let those people be poor. It's cool. Why don't you hang out with your teddy bear in the 100-acre woods? And it's just like that never worked for me. And I also hate that plot line entirely because as a parent who like you have to work, and it's like not something that you're like, oh yeah, no, I'd hang out with you, but I gotta go to work and stuff. It's because, you know, like there's this thing called money that pays for food and stuff, and like you kind of need to get a job. And I kind of absolutely hate this plot line that's like sold to kids as like, you know, oh, if your parents really loved you, they'd stop working and care less about their job and like pay more attention to you. In this economy where people are working more and more, and particularly like a lot of parents like have no choice but to work like several jobs and not spend times and weekends with their kids, it's kind of fucking bullshit that movies like this continue this plot line that's clearly a baby boomer dream that will just not be an actuality probably in my lifetime. You know, it's interesting in Hook when they did it, when you had that presented by a bunch of people who had more money than God and probably could have just stopped working and been fine for the rest of their lives. So they're like, yeah, think of what's really important, family, because, you know, sometimes you have enough money. Am I right? Right? People can relate to this. Sure. And Christopher Robin does exactly that. But I think the thing is, it's like it puts more on the family thing over that he is like saving all these people's jobs. His whole department, in fact, probably will be gone away. These people that presumably he does spend a lot of time with. And it's commendable to save that many people's jobs. And although he doesn't, in the movie, he doesn't actually, spoilers I guess, but who cares, doesn't actually get to the percentage point to like actually save all of their jobs, he gets pretty damn close. And that's pretty commendable to be going over these papers. Like when they go like, oh no, we lost his paperwork. I'm like, yeah, you lost his paperwork. And now, you know, like 3 families aren't going to eat tonight. Thanks, Eeyore. This movie plays fast and loose with this plot, but it doesn't like think of the ramifications. Like they shouldn't have had him saving people's jobs that weekend. Like it should have just been like something frivolous. And saving people's jobs as a manager isn't frivolous. It's actually commendable. He could have just said, you know what, fuck it. I don't like these fucking people. I can have a big office because they'll all not be here. So like, cool, they're gone. I'm going to chill with my kid. That's the shitty version of Christopher Robin. But the problem morally with Christopher Robin is it sort of argues, hey, why didn't you do that? But then is also like, but we saved these people's jobs also. So like, everything's cool. And you're like, wait, what the fuck? I think the thing with these movies, and I would say this is probably one of the better Disney live action films, Pete's Dragon is pretty much the top, and then everything else is just a bottom somewhere that I don't care about. I do think this did a better job. I think there's certain little glimpses of something interesting where you have Pooh having a back and forth with Christopher Robin in London and doing things with the Pooh iconography, which I thought was actually kind of creative in certain things. But I will say I never got into this movie because it felt like so bogged down by both being a bad idea and also using a plotline that I'm frankly sick of and I find completely unrealistic at this point. And that I kept thinking like, why are we acting like he shouldn't be working this weekend? Like, holy shit, like 20 people are going to lose their jobs if this guy doesn't work this weekend. Like this should honestly maybe be an economic horror movie. I don't know if we do those enough, but like this, I could make the case for it. Morally, this film's frankly, and economically, this film's a mess. I think kids would probably like it, to be honest. I think every generation gets their version of this shitty plotline, and I guess this is this generation's, yay. But it doesn't have a Rufio, so like, why would I care? Christopher Robin and the Disney live action films, I always, when I see them, I always feel like, I feel culturally as a critic and someone who enjoys film and sees what's popular and tries to understand the multiplex and things like that, that I feel like I'm almost forced to just accept these as like the big movies. And I feel like a lot of times we're forced into these things because they're big and Disney has this big brand. I really don't like these movies. I don't think they're very good. I don't think they're adding anything cinematically. I think this could have, but part of me thinks like they should have rejiggered it. They could have had it be about his daughter going into the 100-acre woods. They could have had it been like change the plotline. The idea of this plotline is a plotline of people who are rich and can stop working and can, not miss a baseball game and not miss a big moment of their kids' lives because they have to work. But for most parents, especially in this fucking country and in like all of the world, you have to work, and that's just life, and I'm sorry. I grew up with Hook and thinking like, yeah, parents, they should, they should make all the things. But now that I'm a parent, you're like, yeah, we have to pay for daycare and food, and sorry. It's like you have to grow up and accept those things. And I think this film is obviously like a fantasy film. It's like literally financially and plot-wise living in a fantasy land from people who clearly have too much money and think that this is an acceptable kind of moral lesson to teach people, when in fact it's rubbing your fucking nose in it in a way that's like really honestly kind of distasteful. I think in times it reaches a little bit of glimmer of hope. When they go to the city, we've seen, animated characters are in the city, and city people are like, what, this is crazy. There's certain things like Matt Berry and Mackenzie Foy have a really cool like back and forth, very short scene. I feel like they could have done more interesting things with the supporting characters, who they just sort of like, there's this guy who wants to play Gin Rummy who he doesn't want to play Gin Rummy with. Why don't just admit it, Christopher Robin? Like, what's the deal with that one? Like, he just seems a little forceful with this Gin Rummy thing. I don't know, is Gin Rummy boring? I have no clue. I've never played it. Everyone in his office is underdeveloped except for his shitty boss. Like, his wife and his daughter, like, you kind of know what's going on with them, but you don't. And I will say this film probably should be called Christopher Robin and Early 20th Century Emotional Trauma, because it's like from boarding school to World War II to his father died when he was really young to he missed the birth of his daughter in the first couple years of her life because he was at war. It's like, yeah, that's a bad situation this guy's been handed from like almost immediately after he left Winnie the Pooh. Like, it's not like, oh, he got hard because he likes money. It's like, no, he lost that because his life sounds horrible. It's almost like they should have had a scene of him like screaming over his friend who just, had his head blown off or something. But it's just like the fact that this guy is like conscious and not a raging alcoholic. Oh my god, that's this movie, isn't it? He just like has gone full into alcoholism and believes he sees Pooh again. That would have made this movie better. But like it's just like so many different issues I think with it, and I think structurally it just falls in line with what these kind of films are supposed to do. I think when you look at why people like Pete's Dragon, is it was different. It did something new with a plotline and sort of updated it and said something with it that the original didn't. And I don't think, Winnie the Pooh, the original film, was just like a series of short stories and things, especially for a film that's as beloved in America, especially, that's as loose as that one. And Christopher Robin doesn't really feel that way. It feels very tied down to being what a conventional family film should be. It feels like Disney on autopilot, which almost all of these films do, despite spending, a fuck ton on this. It has plenty of great screenwriters like Tom McCarthy, Alex Ross Perry, Allison Schroeder, people like that who, should probably know better and have written interesting, big, broad movies before. But this just frankly isn't really one of them. It's fine, basically. I don't hate I mean, I sort of hate this movie, but I don't fully hate this movie. I just think it doesn't really understand what kind of moral lesson it's teaching kids in this day and age, and just kind of goes ahead to kind of what you're just supposed to do with the family film like this. And it didn't really think of the ramifications of what it's doing with it. It just kind of just went all speed ahead in making this sort of thing, and just feels sort of clueless and outdated and also really uninteresting. Even if it wasn't all those things, and even if I wasn't a parent, I wouldn't be like, oh man, Christopher Robin. I'd still be like, wow, that was predictably uninteresting. Good for you, Disney. I mean, you shot it like a Terrence Malick film. I could feel the influence of Where the Wild Things Are. I loved hearing Jim Cummings. Jim Cummings is the star of this movie. Everybody else, frankly, just I didn't think was great, except for the Matt Berry, Mackenzie Foy thing. I don't particularly love this film, but I think it's probably the second best of the live action films. And if this is the second best of the Disney animation to live action films, you can tell this pseudo franchise is definitely in trouble, and it's more about a corporate kind of market share thing than it has anything to do artistically, which making these films feel as empty and soulless, and all the fears you have of Disney and the kind of things that will shove down your throat, especially knowing that they're as powerful as they are right now, makes this film feel kind of as empty and kind of corporate as, kind of your greatest fears of what Disney could be. But I still had an okay time, I guess, so it wasn't as bad as Beauty and the Beast, right? So if you have seen Christopher Robin and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.